Hello, everyone, and welcome to ACS webinars, connecting you with the best and brightest minds in chemistry, live from Washington, D.C. I'm Mike David, and I will be your host for today's webinar, which we are co-producing with the ACS Education and ACS student communities. We would love to get you involved in the discussion, and you can share your thoughts and questions in the questions panel. It's going to be quite a lot of discussion today, so feel free to enter in those questions whenever you would like. You can also join the discussion on Twitter by including @AmerichemSociety in your tweet. The slides for today's webinar can be accessed right now by going into the handout section of the GoToWebinar control panel. An invitation email to view the unedited recording from today's presentation will be sent to all registrants for a 24-hour period, after which it will be removed, edited, and become an ACS member benefit. And before I introduce our moderators today, we wanted to find out a little bit about you. So I'm going to launch a few poll questions that you can respond to in the interactive window that is going to appear in just a moment. The first being, which best describes you? Which affiliation? Would that be your undergraduate student, grad student, an educator, a researcher, or a manager or administrator? And finally, if you identify as something else, feel free to let us know in the chat so we can get a better idea of who we're talking with today. And I can see the responses coming in now, so I'm going to be closing this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just to share with everyone else, looks like highest percentage at 37% is educator, followed closely by researcher and grad student, and a few undergrad and manager and administrators here as well. Secondly, before we get started, wanted to get your opinion on how you feel about intelligence tools like ChatGPT. Would you say you love them and you're so excited for the next version, or you're currently using the paid version? They're cool, a little creepy. You're still a little undecided, or frankly, you're still just trying to figure out what they all are. And with that, thank you so much for sharing. I am going to close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Make sure we're sharing them all back. 35%, largest percentage, say you love them. Next up, 30% still trying to figure out what they are. 24% a little undecided, and 11% a little unsure. So with that, it is my pleasure. First of all, thank you so much for sharing. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderators today, which we have two, Damian Cooper and Olivia Ishii, both of which are student liaisons with the ACS Undergraduate Student Advisory Board. Damian is a chemistry student here at the University of Southern Mississippi. Well, Olivia is a Fulbright student researcher at the University of Heidelberg, where she researches antiviral development for filaroviruses and tropical diseases. And with that, I will turn it over to the two of you to get us started.
All right, hello everyone. So before we introduce our panelists, we would like to cover some working definitions for our conversation on artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, often abbreviated as AI, is the ability of a computer or machine to simulate human-like intelligence. To meet this qualification, a program or tool must be able to learn from previous situations, which are often presented as formatted data sets, granting the ability to adapt, improvise, and problem solve. In order to achieve artificial intelligence, many tools utilize machine learning, which is the ability for a program to learn without explicit programming. This can further be achieved through deep learning, which utilizes complex neural networks based off of the human brain, in which computational nodes act as neurons. Most advanced AI tools, such as ChatGPT, utilize deep learning algorithms. Damian will now cover some emerging AI tools in the academic space.
So recently, the release of ChatGPT has boosted the prevalence of AI tools in education and research due to accessibility and performance. ChatGPT is a natural language processing program that develops responses to input queries based on training from web pages, books, articles, and more sources. It's important to note that ChatGPT is not a search engine. It's not connected to the internet and access emerging information. Rather, it refers to a training set to assemble novel answers to a user's query. In addition to ChatGPT, there are fewer open access AI tools that are revolutionizing the chemical world and beyond. For example, Wolfram Alpha is a computational knowledge engine that's predominantly used to solve complex math and physics problems. And outside of language and numbers, AI tools such as Folder can be used to produce images in a variety of artistic styles given a prompt. And the applications of AI tools are essentially limitless, and it will become an increasingly present feature in the academic world. And with that, I'll pass on to Mike to ask y'all one more question.
All right, and that brings us to our next question, which describes how you primarily use artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT. And here are your possible responses. Conducting research for work or class, finding data or getting ideas for papers or test questions, just playing around a little bit when you're bored, or you have a PDA that gets my voice commands wrong. Does this count? And thank you so much for sharing all of this. I'm going to leave this open for a few moments longer and close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We had 35% say it was for finding data or getting great ideas for papers. Next up was 31% for conducting research for work or class. Third, at 23%, was playing around when you're bored, and 11% said it's a PDA that gets their voice commands wrong. Does that count? So with that, I will turn it back over to you both.
It's my honor to introduce our first panelist of today, Dr. Amy Fuller. She is an assistant professor of chemistry at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where she instructs undergraduate students in general chemistry and general chemistry laboratory. Professor Fuller has explored the utilization of ChatGPT in chemistry laboratory courses through a recent paper, Potential ChatGPT Use in Undergraduate Chemical Laboratories, developing how this tool can be utilized ethically. Please welcome Professor Fuller.
Thank you very much, Olivia. So to start out, I wanted to say that we investigated ChatGPT basically as soon as we heard about it. So back in November, we were thinking about ways that we could use this new technology in our classrooms, or just how undergraduates could utilize it, because we were sure that they were going to use it also. And so what we did is we fed some data into ChatGPT, some student data about averages, or some density data, and we asked ChatGPT to write a conclusion. We thought that was like the best way ChatGPT was going to use this information. So we asked it to write the conclusion with averages, standard deviations, and also confidence intervals, and kind of summarize what was happening. And then we took that paragraph and we put it into an AI detector. We wanted to see how much the detector would detect if it was all AI written, if it was partially AI written. And so that, is the basis of the paper. And since then, there's been a lot of looking into how ChatGPT works and also how detectors work. And currently, if you have a premium version of a detector, then it's accurate about 84% of the time. And if you have the best free tool you can find, it's accurate about 68% of the time, depending on how useful this or how much AI has been written. And so to me, like, using a detector isn't really worth like the time and effort right now, currently how it sits, to focus on if people are using it or not. And so what I wanted to go into just in a couple of minutes is two different things. I wanted to talk about when should we use AI, and then also a little bit about prompt engineering and what kind of prompts that we can use to get the best data. So in my next slide, I wanted to talk about when I should use AI. So I got this information from AI for Education. They have a lot of really good information about different AI uses. And this will help guide students, or kind of ourselves, on, should we use this? And it's kind of geared towards student language, but also we can think about it in research as well. And so should I use AI? Well, am I going to use it to help me get started on an assignment or a paper or information, right? So just gather information. And that's one of the, that's one of the ways, like, yes, you should use it to help yourself get started. Can I improve what I've already done? So let's say I've written something, I can post it into ChatGPT and have ChatGPT reword or maybe add some extra vocabulary I didn't think of. So it improves that. One way students can use it is just have ChatGPT to explain something. Maybe I'm reading an assignment and I don't understand what it's saying. ChatGPT can go through and explain what we're looking for or help clarify some information. Now, should we use ChatGPT to fully complete an assignment? No, not necessarily. I know I've been guilty sometimes of just copying and pasting like just little questions or emails that I want to send. I'll have ChatGPT write me a little email out, and I've used that fully. And then also help with my research, find facts, quotes, resources. That's a little more difficult. We shouldn't use it for that because ChatGPT does not use current language or current information. And so sometimes the links or resources are outdated. So especially with research, it makes it very difficult to use something like ChatGPT. And so on the next slide, the last thing I want to just touch on before we get into the Q&A is about prompt engineering. And this is the methodology. This is how I kind of set up all my prompts and from others that I've talked to about it. And I've only used the ChatGPT 3.5 version, which is the free version. I'm a little too cheap to use the expensive version right now. And so when you're writing a prompt, what they say is it's best to give ChatGPT its character. So you want to tell ChatGPT who it is. So ChatGPT, you're a researcher that wants to write an introduction to this paper. Or I'm a student, or ChatGPT, you're a student who needs to solve this math problem or this chemistry problem, right? You tell ChatGPT who it is. Next, you want to include a lot of detail for what you want. So for emails, for example, I will say, ChatGPT, you're a professor, you want to respond and tell me these 3 things in the response and make it sound professional. And ChatGPT will write me out a paragraph. When you do this, a lot of times ChatGPT will give you an output that you're not really expecting. And so sometimes you have to try again. I know with me, when I first gave ChatGPT prompts, it would list like this huge long paragraph and keep telling me things. I'm like, no. So one of the things I've started doing is telling, hey, ChatGPT, tell me this in 50 words. Give it a word limit. And sometimes it listens, but you want to shorten what it says. And so as you engineer your prompts, you want to try and try again on what you give it. And sometimes I copy its response and say, okay, respond this way again, make it more familiar, make it better. And so that's what I mean by try again. And another tip I heard is if you're having problems in engineering your prompts, break it down into sections. So ChatGPT, give me a topic sentence. So you're just having it write like little parts of what you actually want, and then you can put it together as the human behind the thoughts. Just a couple more tips is on the left-hand side of ChatGPT, they have, is your history on or off? And with this, I've been told that if it's on, then ChatGPT uses your responses and its responses as a learning model. Now, if you are using like sensitive information or information you want to publish, you want to turn that history off so that it's not using your information as part of that learning model. And then the last thing I want to talk about is double check all your information. So at the very beginning, I told you we were playing with this ChatGPT right in November, right as it started, and we were just like amazed at what it could do. We were looking at the words that ChatGPT wrote just based off of the numbers. And one of the big things we didn't do is we didn't check the data that ChatGPT spit out. So we gave it like 4 or 5, we'll give it 5 different numbers and ask it to calculate the average, and ChatGPT calculated the average wrong. And we didn't catch it until much later after our paper had been published. And so that's like a big, huge thing. Double check all the information because even the averages could be wrong. And so you just want to make sure that every little part of that's correct. And so with that, I'll turn the time back over to our moderators to introduce the next person.
Thank you, Amy. It's my pleasure to introduce our second speaker of today, who is Dr. Andre Pimentel, who is a professor at the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro, otherwise known as PUC Rio. His research specializes in utilizing computational chemistry methods to study molecular dynamics and drug design. Dr. Sheila Pimentel recently published "Do Large Language Models Understand Chemistry?" A conversation with ChatGPT, in which he explores the degree to which AI models can accurately understand and answer complex questions pertaining to chemistry. With that, I'll leave it on you.
First of all, thank you for the organizers and the moderators, Demi and Olivia. Thank you, Demi, for the nice introduction. And thank you for inviting me to participate in this webinar. Could you move on? I'd like to talk about first about the evolution of ChatGPT. When I did this work was in March, in the very beginning of March, and we tried to make complex questions about chemistry. The first question we did was about chemical representations. We have a couple chemical representations. The most famous is the smiles, and we made maybe about 20 questions about translating name to smiles and vice versa, smiles to name. And the ChatGPT in March, the beginning of March, was pretty bad. Turned out ChatGPT made 27% of correct questions, correct answers. And it's pretty strange for me. For example, compounds like ethane, propane, pentane, very simple like benzene. ChatGPT translated the name to smiles wrongly. After 4 months, we did the same, we repeated the same questions. ChatGPT made the right answers, and also Bard, for example, did the same. About 100% of answers was correct. Could you move? Another question was about the hydrophobicity. We have the octanol water partition coefficient called log P. We did the questions using essential oils components like limonene, eugenol, gamma terpenine, and the error for most of the log P coefficients was very small. But some compounds, I don't know why, it turned out like 100% error. So ChatGPT in March made 31% of the questions correctly, and after 4 months, Bard and ChatGPT also reduced a lot the error, but the explanation was wrong. This was very strange because it's a very simple question. The explanation would be very easy to make it, but both tools, AI tools, made wrong explanations. The other question we did was about the coordination components. Could you move? The coordination component geometry. We did the same. We asked about the geometry, and the ChatGPT made 58% in March, and after 4 months, Bard and ChatGPT made about 100%. And about the the symmetry. Could you move? About the symmetry and the point groups. We used very simple molecules like water, methane, benzene, ferrocene, and it turned out the point groups was about 60% of correct answers. And 4 months, both ChatGPT and Bard evolved pretty well and got about 100% of answers. And this was very nice. I mean, it surprised me how fast the AI tools learn about these complex questions. Could you move the slide, please? I'd like to talk about some hopes I have for the futures. I would like to give some shots about about some optimistic shots about the AI tools. First, I hope the problem-solving questions in math, physics, chemistry will be more correct. Right now, it's not. And second, I hope the critical thinking would be deeper in order to contribute more in research and teaching. Right now, critical thinking in AI tools are not good. And third, I hope AI and also the codes, the API systems would be free and open for everyone. That means equity and accessibility for any poor and rich people. Right now, we have just the 3.5 open, but the codes are not open, and the API is not open as well. The 4.0, the version 4.0 of ChatGPT is paid. And fourth, I hope anyone would open the eyes, change the mindset, and develop AI literacy, upgrade its knowledge to do the same things in different and faster ways. And five, I hope anyone understands AI-generated tests are easily detected nowadays, and they can use AI in a smart way without copy and paste. And AI test must be only the first step. Then use your creativity and critical thinking to make the progress in the articles, in the manuscripts. And finally, I hope the students, we always need creative teachers, and this wonderful profession will reinvent and exist forever. Okay. I hope everybody here would follow these 66 tips and progress about the AI tools learning. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pimentel. I'm very excited to introduce our final panelist, Professor Kirk Shawns, who is a Robert A. Welch Professor of Chemistry at the University of Texas at San Antonio, as well as the Editor-in-Chief of ACS Applied Materials and Interfaces, as well as ACS Applied Materials Family Journals. His research focuses on the interaction of light with organic and organometallic compounds, and Dr. Shawns is invested in the ethical usage of AI in chemistry and recently co-authored Best Practices for Using AI when Writing Scientific Manuscripts, which evaluates the strengths, weaknesses, and requirements when using AI resources. Please welcome Professor Shawns.
Thank you, Olivia, for the introduction, and thanks everybody for joining today for this discussion. And so my perspective on AI is as in the viewpoint of an editor of a large scientific journal at American Chemical Society. The editors of ACS journals, we communicate among ourselves pretty frequently and talk about issues that are common to the theme of scientific publishing. And when AI, in particular ChatGPT and the other tools like Bard that have come out since then was released earlier this year, we began talking pretty actively about how AI would potentially impact scientific publishing. And through these discussions, many editors got together and co-wrote this article that's highlighted here on the screen. Jillian Buriak from the University of Alberta and one of the editors of ACS Nano was the lead author of this paper, but we all contributed. And if you're interested in the use of AI in publishing, and also publishing, I think includes, writing a thesis for students, writing proposals for early career or mid-career scientists, as well as writing manuscripts. And some of the things that I'll bring up today and that are covered in this paper that's highlighted here, I think are important to review, and I encourage all of you to take a look at that article and think about some of the things that we'll talk about here in the next couple of minutes. So on the next slide, this slide sort of highlights, what are the strengths of using AI in scientific communication. And again, scientific communication is broadly defined, writing papers, proposals, theses, but also, putting together talks for communicating at scientific meetings. So the first thing that AI can help you with is really to jumpstart your writing. I'm sure many of you, myself included, suffer from writer's block, and that is when you first sit down to write, you don't really know where to get started. And AI can really help you with that, because it can help you write that first sentence or that first paragraph that you need to sort of get yourself into the flow and moving on writing. I'll tell you, though, that you need to be careful, and I'll come back to how you need to be careful about that, but it's useful in this way. Secondly, AI can be helpful to help you refine what you've already written. And by that, what I mean is take a title that you're using for a paper or maybe a thesis or a thesis chapter and feed it into an AI chatbot and ask it to refine it for you, to shorten it, to elaborate on it, to give you iterations. And it will do that. And sometimes you'll like what it comes back with, sometimes you won't. But it can help you sort of vary things, much like using a thesaurus or to sort of come up with synonyms for words. AI is much more complicated because it can come up with different ways of phrasing the same statement that you've already phrased yourself. You can also use it to shorten an abstract, to refine an abstract. You can use it on a conclusions paragraph. So again, it can be used to sort of help you with your writing and to refine your text and to improve perhaps on what you've already written. Another very important use, I think, and I suspect that many in the audience will have this experience, and that is that many writers are not native English speakers. And AI can very powerfully take your language that you've written and do grammar checking, grammar corrections on paragraphs, sentences, and so forth. So I think this is one of the real strengths of AI tools is helping non-native English speakers. And as I understand it, although I haven't used it much in this way myself, AI can also do translations for you. So you might write in your native language and then see if it can translate it into English or perhaps another language that you might need. Finally, AI can help you sort of cover the bases or get topics that you may have overlooked in your writing. So you might ask it to expand on, again, an introduction and cover topics that aren't there. There are limits to this, as Professor Fuller pointed out at the beginning, and I'll mention the next slide. You know, AI tools are not always right up to date in terms of their training, and therefore, if you're writing something on a topic that's a very recent topic in the literature, the AI may not be useful in that regard. Okay, so these are the benefits. What are some of the downsides and the things that we should be concerned about? So first off, and I think, again, if you've used ChatGPT or the related tools, you probably already recognize that if you try to get it to give you in-depth analysis of something, it's not very good at it. Really, the analytical strengths of these tools are weak at best, and therefore they're really, you know, best for just revising texts that you've written, but don't expect them to sort of get into something in more depth than you're able to do it with your own thinking and your own knowledge. We've already talked about this a few times, but it's worth, again, mentioning the standard AI tools like ChatGPT 3.5, which I'm most familiar with, do have a limited database. They don't cover the recent scientific literature, and therefore don't expect them to give you, you know, sort of state-of-the-art scientific or technical, you know, updates on things that you might better be able to uncover yourself with literature searching using tools like Web of Science or Google Scholar. Most importantly is the effect which the experts, I think, call AI hallucination. And where I've seen this happen is when I ask an AI tool to give me 5 references on a topical area in science, and it will come back and give you these 5 very nicely formatted references, and they'll be in ACS style if you ask them to do that. But then when you go to look those references up, you'll find out they don't exist. So the AI bot is just hallucinating and giving you references that are correct in terms of the way they appear, but they don't exist. And so do not use references that are created and formatted by a chatbot without checking them first. And the likelihood is that most of the time you check them, they'll be false. They don't exist. So be cautious with that. And then finally, be careful. If you use AI text as written, it might include plagiarism because, of course, AI is trained on existing text, and therefore it may be drawing from text that might be copyright protected and so forth. And so you should be very cautious about using verbatim text from an AI chatbot. Next, finally, some summary recommendations. And to speed things up, don't cut and paste from an AI chatbot into something that you intend to submit to a journal or to use in your dissertation. Only treat ChatGPT or other chatbot output as an early draft, meaning that you should use it as a starting point, revise it yourself, rethink it, rewrite it, but don't use it verbatim. I've already mentioned verify any citations that you use that are coming from a chatbot. And then finally, how do you acknowledge the use of AI? Well, don't use AI as a co-author. That's already defined by ACS and their ethical guidelines, and other publishers, I think, are following that. But you should acknowledge the use of a chatbot if you've used it either in the experimental work or in writing the draft of the text or the experimental part of the paper. And I would mention that I know that program managers for funding agencies are very concerned about the use of ChatGPT and other AI tools in proposal preparation. So if you're a proposer and writing proposals, my recommendation is to be very cautious with the use of AI as you do that. So I'll close out. I put together a slide that has some recent papers that are in the chemical literature on the use of AI, and you might take a look at some of these if you're interested in reading further. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it back to Damien.
Hey, yeah. So just kind of before we get to our Q&A, just kind of if anybody was interested at ACS Fall this Sunday coming up, there are gonna be some more AI talks. If anybody's interested, of note, this is kind of a hybrid, so if you're able to attend in person, you can attend some of these different sessions here in terms and regards with AI. So with that, we can start opening up the Q&A session. And thank all of our panelists for their chats. I really enjoyed listening to everybody speak today, and I kind of want to open it up with asking for anybody's opinion, whoever wants to go first. What is the difference between using ChatGPT to collect information and other types of tools, kind of whether it be AI or non-AI?
I guess I'll start answering that question. For me, when you use things like ChatGPT and you enter a prompt, basically you get an answer back to that question or specific to what you ask it. Like in Google, if you ask the same question, you're going to get different web pages and sometimes thousands, right? And Google filters what website you could look through first. Then you have to click on the website to actually find the information you're looking for. So I think ChatGPT kind of streamlines all the information for you to give you a more focused view. And then it's your job to go through and check, is this correct, the information that ChatGPT is giving?
Yeah, I would just say, one of the strengths, of course, of the chatbots is that you get back the answers in natural language. But again, being cautious with recognizing the limitation of the training data sets and things like that, that the answers may lack the depth that you might get from your own kind of searching using other tools.
Yeah. I think we must be careful about literature references because sometimes the references come out doesn't exist, for example, and we need to check out every time we make a search.
Perfect. And I'll go ahead and ask another question. Any of you are free to answer. But how do you guys see AI tools evolving in the near future?
I guess I'll quickly take a stab. My guess is they're going to get smarter and more specific. So they're going to be trained on data sets that are going to be current and specific to fields of interest to scientists and students and researchers. So that's probably where things are heading.
I also have read that they're starting to think about putting watermarks on all of the ChatGPT outputs. And so how developed that is, I'm not certain right now, but they'll put so you'll be able to tell what's exactly written word for word by an AI based on the watermark and where it came from. And just since November, it's changed so significantly, the things we've seen and done and what we've learned from it, that it's going to make a big difference.
I think there are two challenges that the ChatGPT must be improved. First, the problem-solving questions. I think the problem-solving questions, sometimes the answer is pretty bad, and also the critical thinking. If you type something that you need some deep analysis, the ChatGPT doesn't make a good analysis.
I guess one more thing is the difference in the level of what the free version versus the paid version can do will probably increase dramatically as well.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank y'all. I do have another question. I think maybe Kurt, can I be able to answer this one? How can you be sure that ChatGPT is giving you accurate information? Let's say if you're maybe using it like for publications or something such as that.
Use another search tool to verify the information. So if it's a reference, go look it up. If it's text, paste it into Google search and see what comes back. Google search is actually quite good at recognizing plagiarism and where things come from.
Sometimes you need to be a specialist to detect the wrong things. So I mean, I think this is the best way.
And as Professor Fuller pointed out, check your work, check its work. I've seen the same thing where you give it problems to solve and it looks very reasonable in the solution, but the calculations are just flat wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Get out your calculator and double check it.
Perfect. I have another question that I'm going to initially direct to Professor Fuller. But what types of chemistry concepts do you think that ChatGPT can explain accurately? And can students use these explanations to supplement their learning?
I absolutely think that students can use ChatGPT to supplement their learning, especially in like general chemistry, organic chemistry. A lot of the vocabulary words have been set for a long time. And so students can use, you know, if they're reading through a chemical question, they don't understand like specific parts of the vocabulary, maybe they could put the whole question in and have ChatGPT explain it in a different way. It might help the student understand a little bit better. One of the things that I have done is I've taken and put in a homework question into the chat window and said, you know, pretend you're a general chemistry student and solve this problem. And sometimes ChatGPT will just spit out the answer, right? And other times I adjust my prompt and I say, okay, tell me step by step what you've done. And that way I'm not just relying on ChatGPT to have an answer for me, but actually step by step, this is how it's solved. And what it does is it helps start that problem solving process for students. And, you know, for me too, sometimes like I can help understand the problem a little bit better. And also I remember I did ask ChatGPT to do a stepwise problem and it showed me all the steps were correct and then the number at the bottom was wrong. So you also have to double check with the calculator all the steps, but it is a very, very useful tool with homework and also understanding chemistry concepts.
Yeah, I have a question for Andre. Can AI models provide possible mechanisms of reactions, and in doing so, can it probe like different dynamics of intermediates, or can it act as like a simulator for these different intermediates?
Well, we must realize the ChatGPT and other AI tools cannot predict the future. So when you are trying to talk about the dynamics, it's like you are trying to predict the future. So it's not possible to do this because ChatGPT and AI tools just rely on the past, you know.
Perfect. And I have another question that would probably best be answered by Dr. Shantz. How do you see AI influencing and or disrupting the peer review process or peer reviewer?
Thank you for the question. I think it's very much in line with all the things that I talked about in my little segment. I think AI could be beneficial to a reviewer in helping them phrase their review, especially if they're a non-native speaker. So many reviews have an introductory paragraph, which you know, AI could assist the writing of that. But on the other hand, one could see that in the future, a reviewer could feed the text of a whole paper into a chatbot and ask it to write a review and then submit that. That could be a danger, and one that I think the editors are paying attention to. I think at this point it would probably be pretty easy to spot, but over time it may become harder. So I think that will be a concern that you know, we'll have to keep an eye on.
I'd like to ask a question from the audience. This is directed at Dr. Fuller. What kind of assessments are best for an online chemistry class, which ChatGPT can answer?
So I actually in the last few years taught a lot of online chemistry courses, and because of that, all of my assessment needed to be open internet, open book, open everything. There was no way that I could limit, you know, I had 350 students in my class. There was no way I could limit what resources they could use when they were at home. And so what I ended up doing was making up questions. So like, what's the Lewis dot structure for COH or something, right? So there's not really a molecule that if you put that into Google, it would come up with the right answer, right? Or how many valence electrons, sorry. And then also, you know, so I would make up just little tiny words that wouldn't be easily understood assessment-wise. And I also think that, so, you know, that's one way. And then I also think that because of the way ChatGPT is right now, the student should be checking their work anyway. And so if a student uses ChatGPT on the whole entire assignment, you know, they're not going to get 100%. And, you know, who knows how much they'll get right if they use fully ChatGPT. So I would, as an instructor, caution the students not to use it as a whole thing. Use it to check yourself or start the learning process.
That's a great response. I have a question directed to Dr. Pimentel. What are the differences among the different AI tools? For example, Google Bard is connected to the internet while ChatGPT is not. And is that why it gets more accurate results?
Let's see. I mean, in the past, in the very beginning, ChatGPT has had an API to do programming. So in the past, it was very easy. If you know Python, for example, you could do some programming very easily. You could add information to the ChatGPT version, and right now it's not possible. And just if you pay, no. The Bard, you cannot do this. So you just have the platform, like you have the ChatGPT 3.5, but we don't have the 4.0, you know. And you also have the Bing from Microsoft. So it's exactly the same. The three of them has the platform. It's very easy to do. You just go online, sign in and subscribe, and it's very easy to use. But the only one that had a API is the ChatGPT, the Open AI, you know, but you need to pay to use it.
I had a question for Dr. Sean. Where's the line between plagiarism and using an AI tool? Can we use ChatGPT to refine our writing or proofread a proposal?
Okay, first on the question about plagiarism, you know, plagiarism is defined as reusing text that's you know, been written or published by someone else with either an implied or an implicit copyright. And where does plagiarism start and end? I think the editors of scientific journals consider when runs of 3 or 4 sentences are essentially identical with something that's been published previously, then would be unallowable or be considered to be plagiarism and should be removed or rewritten. So if a chatbot comes up with these runs of text, then sure, it's going to be plagiarism. But in my experience, the chatbots sort of string together bits and pieces from various places. So often a chatbot isn't going to get you into plagiarism trouble directly. But on the other hand, remember, chatbots are not particularly creative. And you know, as scientists, students, we want to seek creativity, originality, new thinking in our writing. And so if you're seeking that, a chatbot is not going to help you a lot. It's going to help you with getting the wording down, refining the way you're saying what you're thinking, but it isn't going to help you with the underlying thought process. And I think that's the way to think about it. If you're really truly interested in writing about original thought and thinking, the chatbot isn't the place to start. I hope that helps.
Dr. Sean's kind of jumping off of that point. We mentioned using AI to write things, but do you have any recommendations for AI tools in preparing figures, graphical abstracts, cover art, and how might that be done ethically?
I personally have tried a little bit to see what the one that's from the OpenAI, I don't recall what that tool is called, but I haven't found it to be particularly useful for chemical concept presentation, but I don't have a lot of experience per se. But again, I think one needs to be cautious because much of the graphical imagery is sourced that these chat bots or graphic bots create. So you want to be careful not to, create an image that is present somewhere else on the internet, perhaps in somebody else's copyrighted work, because then that could get you into trouble.
I had a question for Dr. Pimentel. What are some of the pitfalls that we can avoid when we're using different AI tools?
Could you repeat, please?
I said, what are some of the pitfalls that we can avoid when we're using different AI tools?
Let's see. Pitfalls. See. Well, usually the ChatGPT generating correct information when there is no data about the subject on the web. I mean, for example, open questions. For example, if you ask the ChatGPT, he says he's not sure, but he just some suggestion. Also, ChatGPT generates correct answers, but the explanations are sometimes incorrect. Also, sometimes the answers are not reproducible. And also the problem-solving questions, if you, for example, if you get some physical chemistry questions with a lot of numbers, I mean, the development of the question to solve the problem, the procedure are not good, but sometimes, mostly, the development is incorrect. Just the some pitfalls I found in ChatGPT, for example.
Thank you. I have a question for Dr. Fuller. You mentioned how educators can avoid the improper use of ChatGPT in students, but how can instructors use ChatGPT to facilitate learning?
A few things that I have used is I've had ChatGPT write me multiple choice questions for exams. It did pretty well for writing 10 of them, but they weren't very creative questions. They were just very standard run-of-the-mill questions you could pick out of any textbook. Some of the answers were incorrect, but I had it write multiple choice questions with 4 different answers. It saved me time. It gave me ideas. I have used the add-on extension into my email. I've tried that a few times. It saves sometimes on responding to emails because I'll say, write an email saying no, and it'll expand on that. I've used it to create PowerPoint presentations, and this was all early on, so the programs are better now. You just have to practice with the prompt engineering, stuff like that. So there's a lot of ways that you can make your learning faster or make your lesson planning faster. You can also ask it for ideas for different topics when you create your lectures.
I have a question for Dr. Sean. So in terms of like asking questions to ChatGPT, are there any recommendations on how to ask those questions? So like saying, could you ask, like, are there any references on blank, 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 instead of demanding that ChatGPT give these references to avoid it making these up on itself?
I've tried with ChatGPT quite a few times about getting references, and this is the 3.5 version. And every time that I've used it, at least half of the references are not correct, or don't exist, rather, I should say. They're hallucinations. I haven't tried this much with Bard, and my understanding is that Bard might be better at generating references, but I don't have experience with that. Perhaps Professor Pimentel or Fuller could
Yes.
comment on that.
I mean, if the literature is on the Google Academics, for example, is easily to find, and the Bard finds the right information. But if it doesn't, for example, if it is a ACS journal, for example, that's paid, for example, so the ChatGPT or Bard don't find the information. And if the tool doesn't find the information, the tool just suggests something very weird.
Perfect. And I actually have another question for you, Dr. Pimentel. As the AI field is evolving rapidly, how can we as researchers, educators, students adapt to these rapidly changing tools?
I think first, I think we must realize the AI is there, and the students want to use, and we need to learn as a professors, as teachers, because maybe if, students are going to need this as a profession, in the professional life. So the students are very different from when I was young. When I was young, I didn't think about this, but now the students need this information. They need to change the mindset of the professor to just to accept what he wants. I think this is the main idea.
Thank you all for answering questions, and sadly we're going to run out of time, so we're going to have to wrap it up. And do y'all have any final thoughts you have to say to anybody?
I guess I'll lead off with the final thoughts. I just think that we should embrace the technology and not be afraid of it. So figure out ways that we can teach students how to use it effectively, how we can use it effectively, join different Facebook groups, Discord groups, chat with each other, just try it out, figure out what's best, because the technology is changing rapidly, and there's no way that you can do the research to figure out everything that's going on at once. And so as a general knowledge coming together to use these at the best of the ability, I think is the best thing that we can do as educators and researchers.
Andre, you go next. I'll say something quickly. So I'd say from the standpoint of scientific publishing, keep an eye on the literature. I think you'll see, articles, editorials being published. There's been quite a few in the last few months, and try it out, but follow the guidelines that we've recommended here in terms of the cautions, benefits and downsides of using AI in your writing. I think we're good.
Yes.
All right, well, panel, thank you so much for joining us today to share your thoughts on the possible uses of AI in chemistry. And as we wind things down, I just wanted to ask you all one of the questions we asked earlier in the webinar again, to see if there was any shift. So now that you've heard everything, how do you feel about artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT? And just to read them off once more, love them. So excited for the next version. They are cool but creepy. Still a little undecided, or you are still trying to figure out what they are. And for the final time, I will leave this open for just a few moments, and we'll close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so I did keep track of the results that came in earlier. So love them, so excited for the next version has gone from 35% to 42%. Cool but creepy has gone down a little bit. It was 19%. This round was 11%. Still undecided, exactly the same at 24%. And still trying to figure out what they are, went from 30% now to 16%. So looks like we had a little bit of success here. I want to let you know about all of the future webinars we have coming up. Next week on August 16th, we will be partnering with the Mexican Chemical Society for a discussion on the development of recombinant monoclonal antibodies, their production, with an emphasis on purification platforms. And as a note, that webinar will be in Spanish. And then on Thursday, September 7th, learn how to find support and mentorship as a student or professional, as Dr. Armando M. Riviera Fertega, Dean of Economic Development and Workforce Education at Los Angeles City College, will share the inspirational story of his journey overcoming challenges and embracing opportunities on his way to a successful career. Academic career as a community college chemistry faculty, investigator, and administrator. We would love to hear what you think about our program, and you can reach out to us through the ACS social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, or simply send us an email to acswebinars@acs.org. Of course, we're curious to hear what you thought of today's broadcast, and a short survey will pop up directly after the webinar that will take just a minute to complete. Also remember that an invitation email to view the recording from today's presentation will be sent to everyone that registered. This will be open for a 24-hour period to everyone, after which it will be removed, edited, and become an ACS member benefit at acs.org. And that wraps up our program for today. On behalf of all of us here at the ACS Webinar Studio in Washington, D.C., thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.